Welcome to ILTV's Israel Daily. I'm Ladar Gravelazi, and today we mark 1 year to the October 7th massacre, where evil, hatred, and brutality were unleashed into our world. On what was supposed to be a beautiful Saturday morning, a holiday, Hamas terrorists infiltrated Israel and raped, tortured, burned, and slaughtered their way from community to community in the peaceful kibbutzim and towns along Israel's border with Gaza. Today marks 1 year that 1,200 children, mothers, fathers, grandparents, and young men and women who just wanted to dance, so full of passion and life, were all murdered. 1 year that hundreds of people were dragged out of their beds, out of their homes, and taken hostage to Gaza. 1 year since we witnessed the absolute worst of humanity, but we also saw the best of it. Remarkable acts of love, of heroism, and of sacrifice. And today, 1 year later, we are still in mourning. We're still in shock, still incomplete. 101 people are still being held captive in Gaza, enduring the unimaginable brutality, rape, and torture we saw on that dark day on a daily basis. Today, 1 year later, tens of thousands of Israeli families are still unable to return home, unable to reclaim their lives. Today, 1 year later, millions of Israelis are still under attack, running to bomb shelters as missiles continue to rain down on their cities every day. For Israelis, this has been their reality for the past year. There was a pre-October 7th world and a post-October 7th world, forever changed. A world that seems to have turned upside down. 1 year later, and Israel faces an existential threat spearheaded by the Islamic Republic of Iran and its tentacles, terror proxies of Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis, and others seeking the annihilation of the only Jewish state. This is a 7-front war that Israel is fighting, not only for its very survival, but for the survival of the entire free world, a world built on common values such as freedom, liberty, and equality. 1 year ago today, a darkness was once again unleashed, spreading around the world and threatening to return us to the most shameful days in human history. But in the face of this darkness, one country, Israel, continues to shine bright, unwavering, and determined, offering a beacon of hope. We saw the incredible resilience of the Israeli people, from the NGOs who organized donations and drives to the volunteers who came together, the reservists who spent hundreds of days away from their families on the front lines, the Israelis who rushed back from overseas to take part in the war effort and are still here. And so today, 1 year later, we continue to mourn the beautiful souls lost. We continue to pray and demand the safe return of the hostages. We continue to heal and to rebuild. We continue to fight for better days, and we continue to hope for a better future for our country and our world. The nation of Israel today stopped to remember the tragic events of October 7th with both official and unofficial memorials to those lost. ILTV's Devo Klein reports.
At 6:29 a.m., Israelis across the country blared sirens and took a minute to stand in silence to mark the Hamas-led massacre on Israeli border communities a year ago. It was the deadliest moment in Israeli history and plunged Israel into a year-long war in Gaza. Some 1,200 people were killed in the attack on October 7th, 2023, and 250 others were taken hostage. A year later, 101 hostages and hostage bodies are still held captive by Hamas in the Gaza Strip. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, together with Jerusalem Mayor Moshe Leon, visited the Jerusalem Iron Sword Monument and lit a candle in memory of the victims and fallen heroes.
ביום הזה, במקום הזה, ובמקומות רבים בארצנו, אנחנו זוכרים את נופלינו, את חטופינו, שאנו מחויבים להחזירם, את גיבורינו שנפלו למען הגנת המולדת והארץ. עברנו טבח נורא לפני שנה, ואנו קמנו כעם כאריות, העם כלביא יקום, וכארי יתנשא.
Later in the day, Netanyahu held a special cabinet meeting to mark 1 year to October 7th and held a moment of silence. In Tel Aviv, people stood still while others blew the shofar, a ram's horn used in Jewish religious ceremonies, to mark the anniversary of the most deadly attack in the history of Israel.
We can't believe it's a year. It's a year that just disappeared, vanished. We're still stuck in October 7th, 2023, in one non-ending day of terror, of fear, of anger, of despair.
1 year after the October 7th terror attack, and 101 hostages still remain in captivity. Among them, Guy Gilboa Dalal, who was taken captive by Hamas from the Nova Music Festival. Joining us today is Ilan Dalal, Guy's father. Thank you so much for joining us. So it's been one year since the day that Guy was kidnapped. What is your feeling today, on this day, 1 year later, that Guy is still being held hostage in Gaza?
Well, for us, the families, the whole last year was one ongoing, never-ending nightmare. We just live in constant fear all the time. To get the phone call with bad message, and we know that Guy is in the tunnels right now as I speak, in a dark tunnel with no food, water, clear air, sunshine. We saw the footage of the tunnels where the 6 hostages were murdered, and likely the other hostages are in the same condition. And it's very, very, very hard to think about it and to know that someone you love is being held in such bad condition and there is nothing you can do to help him.
And when was the last time that you heard any news about Guy, had any indication of his well-being?
The last time was about a month before the last rescue of the 4 hostages from Gaza. And we got a sign of life, but I don't know what it means because they didn't tell us exactly what this sign of life means. They just say that he's alive. So we know that he was alive about 5 months ago. And a month later, the IDF rescued 4 hostages from Gaza. And since then, the intelligence told us that all the hostages were brought back down to the tunnels. And since then, we get nothing. We have no news.
And you mentioned Guy's older brother, Gal. From what I understand, they were both at the Nova Festival that day. Gal managed to escape. Can you walk us through that day, what you've learned from that day and of Guy's abduction?
Yes, Guy went to 3 of his best friends, childhood friends. They were together from the kindergarten, and they grew up together in all these years, and they went together to the music festival. My older son, Gal, was not supposed to be there at all because he was in another party of a friend that is going to get married. And about 5 o'clock in the morning, he called his brother and he told him that it's very fun there and he should come. And the guy arrived to the music festival at 6 o'clock in the morning. At about 6:15, they both took a selfie of themselves in the festival, smiling and having the best time of their lives. And 15 minutes later, hell began there and missiles started to fly over their heads. They came in different cars, so they both walked to the cars to come home. They ended up in this dead traffic jam in the exit from the music festival, where the terrorists started to shoot everybody and kill them in the cars. and there was a great panic started there. And they got out of their cars and ran to different directions. Gal, my older son, he escaped and ran for over 10 horrible hours in the fields, seeing atrocities around him, and eventually was rescued by Israeli security forces to the closest police station, and from there we took him home. Guy did not have this luck. He and his friends probably ran to the other side, and since then we didn't hear from him because we didn't have any contact with him, because maybe he lost his phone or something. At about 11:30, at the same October 7, Hamas released the footage, the first video of hostages already inside Gaza, in a dark room, handcuffs, frightened and in shock. And the terrorist is moving on around them with the flashlight and asking them to say something. This is how we learned that guy is it was a hostage and is in Gaza. And in this time, Gal was already in the fields, so I didn't tell him anything about his brother until he got back home. And when he heard that, it was quite a shock.
Imaginable story. And Ilan, today, 1 year later, if you could send a message to Guy, if you could tell him something today, what would you tell him?
I would just tell him to stay strong, to hang in there, because I know that it's very, very, very hard to live in this condition. But I know he's a strong young man, and I believe in him. And I'm confident that soon enough we'll be together, and we'll hug him, and we'll love him so much and miss him so much. And everybody is waiting for him. And don't break your spirit. Just hang in there. Be strong. We love you.
Ilan, thank you so much for joining us today. Our thoughts are with your family, with Guy, with the rest of the hostages, and we pray for their safe return. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
And moving on, the Nova Music Festival in the Re'im Forest was a festival that should have been about music, love, and life, but instead turned into a scene of carnage, terror, and death. Today, 1 year later, hundreds gather at the site to hold an unofficial memorial ceremony. ILTV's Mayan Hoffman was there early this morning. Let's take a look at her report.
Thank you, Lidar. I've been here at Re'im since 5 o'clock this morning, experiencing the pain and sadness of the hundreds of individuals who lost loved ones on the fateful day of October 7th. Young men and women who came here to this forest to dance and instead were murdered by Hamas terrorists. But if there was one underlying message today, it was a message of love. These families not only miss their loved ones, but want to carry on the love and the life of these souls who came here to dance. Let's take a look. This was the final song played at the Nova Open Air Music Festival on October 7th, 2023, the last moment of music before the sirens began to wail. Today, the same track played as hundreds of people gathered in the Re'im Forest before sunrise to commemorate the loss of their loved ones in a touching ceremony attended by the President of Israel. On October 7th, 364 individuals, mostly civilians, were murdered, and many more were wounded at the festival.
Nova represents, more than any place else in Israel, the juxtaposition between good and evil, between celebrating life to celebrating death.
As family members wept at the memorial, where signs for each victim were placed, it became clear that each individual was a world of their own.
Bar was my soulmate, of course. She was the little sis. She was all the joy, all the connection. all the colorful woman that she was.
קשה מאוד, מיום ליום יותר קשה. אנחנו רוצים שיביאו לנו אותו. מחכים ליום הזה.
all days is like a memory day. You go to sleep, you think of him. You come in the morning, you think of him. A song that reminds him, you try to live, you leak tears every time.
Even through their tears, the family shared a message, not just of sorrow, but of love and hope.
I mean, we want peace, we want happiness, we want our life back, we want to feel safe again.
The diversity of the Re'im ceremony was unique, bringing together the range of Israelis who danced at the festival that day. It wasn't a state-run event, but was organized by the survivors and loved ones of the victims themselves, sending a message to the world that Israelis are strong, resilient, and here to stay.
That Israel was attacked for the crime of existing. Israel was attacked for the audacity of being around, just being here, and we are not going anywhere. I believe that Iran and its military proxies and the Ayatollahs have miscalculated what Israelis are about, what Jews are about. We know what it's like to be persecuted. We know what to do about it. We're not going anywhere.
Not going anywhere. And what began with a Hamas invasion of southern Israel turned into a year-long war in Gaza with no end in sight. And as a stark reminder of the ongoing war, Hamas today managed to fire several rockets towards Tel Aviv and central Israel. ILTV's Steve Leibovitz looks back at some of the war's landmarks.
The Gaza war began when thousands of Hamas terrorists invaded Israel, killing 1,300 people and taking 250 others hostage a year ago, prompting Israel to invade Gaza with the goal of destroying Hamas. On October 7th, the invasion swept into southern Israel and caught military defenses by surprise. Hamas gunmen attacked army bases, civilian communities, and an all-night music festival about 3 miles from the Gaza border. The army and security forces took days to secure the borders and eliminate any remaining terrorists in the country. Israeli bombardments of Hamas positions inside Gaza began in the first days. 20 days later, Israel sent the first ground troops into northern Gaza. In mid-November, there was a pause in fighting and an exchange of Israeli hostages for Palestinian security prisoners. The mediated ceasefire ended and the fighting renewed, with the IDF moving from north to south, capturing the Hamas capital of Gaza City. Major operations took place in all areas where Hamas brigades were operating. It took months to destroy Hamas in Khan Yunis. Attempts at a new mediated hostage deal failed to materialize. There were a few successful hostage rescue operations, but other attempts resulted in the tragic loss of hostages' lives. The most recent IDF operations were in Rafah and the Philadelphia route along the Gaza-Egypt border. After 365 days, the IDF is still fighting in Gaza with a current focus on the Jabalia area, where Hamas terrorists have re-emerged from areas captured during earlier IDF operations. The Air Force attacked dozens of terror targets. Today, on the anniversary of the war, Hamas fired a few rockets toward Tel Aviv, setting off alarms but causing no damage or injuries. In this year of war, nearly all of Hamas rocket launching capabilities have been eliminated and all of the organized Hamas brigades destroyed. But terror cells remain, and Hamas has been continuing efforts to emerge from hiding and carry out attacks against Israel. A total of 728 soldiers, reservists, and local security officers were killed and another 4,576 wounded in the war since October 7th. The latest fatality was yesterday. The IDF has investigated some aspects of the failures that allowed the October 7th attack. The Army has now released some new video from October 7th to the public. It includes footage from attacks on kibbutzim and the police station in Sderot.
A year of war in Gaza, a multi front war. And today, anticipation remains high that the planned Israeli retaliatory strike against Iran could come at any moment. Much of northern Israel has had to shelter from increasingly heavy attacks targeting Haifa and the Upper Galilee. There were reported air defense failures resulting in direct rocket impacts and injuries. More from ILTV's Steve Leibovitz.
In the north, heavy incoming rocket fire from Hezbollah resulted in several people wounded in Haifa. The injured were taken to Rambam Hospital for treatment. All of the injured were hit by shrapnel, according to the hospital, and none of them are in life-threatening condition. Most of the upper and lower Galilee was under attack during the past 24 hours, and residents have been repeatedly required to shelter. The IDF continues waves of strikes targeting some 150 Hezbollah targets over the past day in Lebanon. During ongoing ground operations, the IDF entered additional border towns in South Lebanon, and soldiers report finding weapons in nearly every home entered. The army continues to advance and issued evacuation orders for civilians near the South Lebanese town of Dakhia. The army announced the death of a reserve soldier during the fighting. The army has captured Hezbollah military equipment and entered terror tunnels.
אפשר לראות כאן דוגמה לתשתית אויב חפורה היטב ומאורגנת היטב, תת-קרקעית, בתוך בית של אזרח, ובעצם כל תכליתה לפגוע בכוחותינו ולפגוע ביישובים סמוכי הגבל פה בגבול.
Prime Minister Netanyahu visited the Northern Command and spoke to the troops after a year of warfare.
לפני שנה אנחנו ספגנו מכה איומה, וב-12 החודשים שעברו אנחנו משנים את המציאות מקצה אל קצה. וכל העולם משתאה מהמכות שאתם מנחיתים על אויבינו, ואני מצדיע לכם ואומר לכם, אתם דור הניצחון. יחד נילחם ויחד ננצח, בעזרת השם.
And as we mark 1 year since the devastating Hamas attacks and the onset of the war, we reflect on a year that has filled the nation with pain, grief, anguish, and despair. ILTV's Ariel Lechiani went to Hostages Square in Tel Aviv to hear how people are feeling on the 1-year anniversary.
It feels surreal. It's just this much time has gone by and they're still not back, and the 1-year mark is obviously very significant, and this is a time to all band together and really get them home. Like, the time is now.
This year was very, very difficult, very sad. All the day we pray for Khatufim.
Really nothing I can say. Like, I never thought we would still be here a year later, and and I'm still so anxious about how they're doing, and I just want to see them come back already.
It's been a horrible year, but also full with good. Like, I think I saw my people, the people of Israel, standing up and helping each other in a way we hadn't had in, I don't know, either ever or many, many years, because we were in a bad situation before the war and we're in a worse situation right now. But the fact that these are my people and that we are in it together, does make me feel a little bit of hope that it will be good eventually, and we will get out of it, and the war will be over, the hostages will be back home, and we can rebuild ourselves in a better country with a better government, better everything, because the people of Israel are amazing, insanely amazing, amazing people.
Absolutely, an amazing people. And for our viewers, please stay tuned for ILTV's October 7th special, Together with Israel Bonds, airing after this broadcast. And that's a wrap for today's news. For the latest updates from Israel on all your devices, be sure to follow our ILTV channel, subscribe to our newsletter, and explore our website, iltv.tv. Stay informed with the latest news straight from the heart of Israel. I'm Lidar Gravelazi. Be well, stay safe, and thank you so much for watching.